a lot of people mean well, and I can listen to people's advice, but ultimately, any decision I make has to be mine.
Welcome to the Marvelous Moms Club podcast. Discover yourself, break out of mediocrity, and become the mom you've always aspired to be. Here's your host, Kirsten Tyrell.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. This is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be different, so prepare yourself because this is the very first ever semi-anonymous interview. We're not going to change her voice or anything, or maybe we have. Maybe you'll never know. But I'm interviewing somebody today who comes with kind of like a sensitive topic. And I know this is something that it's had to have affected more than a handful of people who probably listen to this podcast. And so it's something I really want to address. We're going to be talking about overcoming infidelity in marriage and how normally the answer is divorce, but how my particular guest today has chosen to proceed with her life in the midst of that. So welcome to the show, she who shall not be named. It's great to have you here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh my goodness. So we're going to be talking about something serious, but the challenge will be, can we actually stay serious
Not
in this
giggling.
discussion? Because no.
I know. But that's the good thing, to be able to laugh about it.
Exactly. So give everybody some backstory a little bit. You don't have to say ages or anything, but you have a couple kids, right?
I have 2 kids. Yep.
Okay.
2 little ones.
So tell me how infidelity first affected your life.
So it was, I'll just be vague. So it was a number of years ago. My kids were smaller than they are now. And obviously I found out my husband had been cheating. So coming from a family where that happened.
That's when the first time it affected you, right? We need to go backwards.
Well, yeah. Yeah, so that would be the first time, coming from a family where this happened with my father. So growing up, I always was just a little bitter. And I thought, if this ever happens to me, I'm kicking you to the curb. There was no question what I would do if that ever happened, because I lived through it. But I guess what I wanted to focus on is when that does happen, you don't really know how you are going to act. Everything that you kind of thought before kind of just goes away. And you're left with looking at the pieces that are in front of you in your situation. And that was kind of the learning lesson. What I thought I would do was not what I did.
Right.
So
what did you do?
So I won't. So what did I do? So obviously finding out that was happening was heartbreaking. I mean, just devastating.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm a religious person. And so I had, in fact, the next day I had gone to a place of my worship and had a really amazing experience where it wasn't like I got answers on if I should do this or do this, but it was really just that I felt like God was completely aware of me and loved me. And that's what I needed. I didn't need answers on, you need to leave, you need to stay. I just needed to know that someone was aware of what I was going through, and that however I proceeded, I would be able to find peace with this. So that really was kind of the best thing that happened, because I was able to be a little bit calm. Now, granted, there was complete moments of freakouts and irrational things, but
yeah, of course.
But
for context, though, too, was this a one-time offense, or is this something that you had to process had been happening for a while? How long into did you figure it out?
So it was pretty quick into it, but there had been some emotional kind of relationships, maybe a little bit before, that never went physical, but this one was a physical one. So, but it wasn't definitely a long-lasting thing. And I will say, because I know I've heard it, I know what people will say, is the person, both of you have to be willing to change, right? It's worked for us because my husband really was willing to stop and change. And if he wasn't willing to stop and change, then that would never work. And I know not all people want to do that. So
when you say both have to stop and change, like with both of you, I know me listening and others would say, well, why did you have to change anything? Like, you didn't do anything wrong. So where did the change have to come for both of you?
Well, I mean, I have to be willing to be forgiving, right? Also, I have to look at, in going to counseling and things like that, you kind of realize, okay, yes, you made a really horrible choice, but what was going on in the relationship to maybe feel like one or the other at different times was feeling lacking in something? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Not that necessarily I caused him to make that. I would never say that like things I did caused him to make that decision, because he's a big boy, like he's going to make a decision. But I mean, we all know that marriage is a work, there's two parties involved, and yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because I think that could be touchy ground if people are like, wait a minute, why does she have to change? And it's not even, and I feel like there's even an evolution of like, if you've chosen, because you have to make the choice, there's a very distinct decision you make. Will I forgive him and move on through this, or will I forgive him? Like, I think either way you have to forgive, right? To be able to have any semblance of a life. But it's, will I forgive and be able to proceed, or will I forgive and choose that I can't live my life with this person anymore? And so once you've made that decision, you then have to go through an evolution of your own of like, you can't just say I forgive you and then harbor this grudge and have this like unhealthy relationship. You've probably had to continue to work on it from both of your ends. Not because you're the one who did anything wrong, but because you now are in a situation where you have to have like genuine forgiveness.
Well, right. And I will say that we do have a really good understanding and communication, because sometimes there's little things that will happen, little triggers that will take me back to a feeling, or like, say he's late coming home from work one day, right? It's kind of natural for me to panic a little bit. But in those situations, what I've learned we have to do, and what we're really good about doing, is I just have to voice it. I just have to say, this is not me bringing it up again and blaming you. This is just me having an emotion to this, natural reaction. And we just kind of talk about it and work through it. Right. So, but I will say, here's a good thing. After all of these years, I don't remember a lot of the details, and I don't remember her name.
Oh, that's good.
Which is huge, because I'm not focusing on it, and I'm not dwelling on it. Like, I'm building our marriage. We're building our marriage.
That's amazing. So why, I think this is something, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, Kirsten, ask her this. I'm so curious about this, whether it's affected them or not. But there might even be people listening who have been in this situation and they've chosen to leave. So what was your motivating factor in forgiving him and continuing to keep the marriage going?
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, we had been married for a number of years. We had children. I grew up in a horrible divorce situation where my parents still hate each other. And I just thought, I would never want to put anything through that. Like, I thought divorce was harder when you're a child, but in my situation with my parents, it affects me more as an adult than it did as a child.
Right.
But I would never stay in a bad situation, for the sake of my kids, right? I'm not an idiot. I wouldn't do that. But what I also, I am a firm believer in repentance and forgiveness through like Jesus Christ, right? And so I had to look at the situation that if he was willing to take care of the problems that he did, and if he could receive forgiveness, who am I to say, that's great, you get it from him, but I'm not giving it to you, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
If I believe in repentance and forgiveness, then I have to believe that applies to my husband.
Right.
Even though maybe you don't want it to apply, right? You have these moments
Mm-hmm.
like, well, no, I want you to suffer and be miserable.
Right. So what has it been like navigating it as a family? Like, how old were your kids roughly when this was going on? Like, were they aware of something? Did you keep it from them? I mean, I know even now they're
Um,
still pretty young. Like, how have you guys navigated that as a family?
so they don't know about it. I mean, I'm sure they could sense some tension because they were young, but they were small, like, you know, 1 and 5, right? So not very
Right.
big, which was a blessing. Sometimes I get asked if I'll ever tell my kids about this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a weird question because honestly, I have no idea. I can see that there might be some benefit if maybe one of them's having an issue that way. Like, then you could, I think that's just going to have to be something we navigate when it comes up. But I don't think I
Right.
would ever sit them down and say, did you know what your dad did? you know,
Let me tell you.
like,
Yeah.
do you want to hear a
Right.
story? I don't know that I would
Yeah.
do that.
Right.
But
Right. That makes sense.
one thing I will say, though, is at the time this was happening, I had another friend going through the same situation, although her husband wasn't really interested in changing. And she had told me about a book called The Divorce Remedy. And there was a
Mm-hmm.
thing in this book that really struck me because, and I bet a lot of people will be guilty of this when they hear it, is that if you have a friend in this situation, it's your natural response because you love that friend and you want to protect him and help him to say things like, oh my gosh, you need to get out of this situation. You need to leave. You just need to get divorced. Like, end it, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Because they want to protect you. But they point out that in a lot of situations, okay, say divorce does happen. Now, where are your friends when you're battling being a single mom with kids and problems and all of the problems that come after that, right?
Right. Right.
It was a
Interesting.
band-aid for them to say, end it, because it made them
Mm-hmm.
feel good, not necessarily you feel good. It's kind of a selfish thing.
Right.
So that was really kind of eye-opening to realize that a lot of people mean well, and I can listen to people's advice, but ultimately any decision I make has to be mine, not,
Mm-hmm.
you
Well,
know,
they don't have all the even if they have all the information, they don't have all the information because there's so much that goes into that emotionally, spiritually,
right,
like there's literally so I mean, for anybody listening to this episode or anybody who's faced with a situation where it's personally happening to them or it's happening to a friend, it kind of sounds to me like it's a zone where there's really no place for judgment whatsoever because it's something that is super
right,
personal. It's something that like I don't know. I feel like anytime somebody makes a decision that big, because if you did choose to leave your husband, they might be like, you did the right thing. Like that was really strong of you. But then yeah, there's really like I don't know, there would be a different support system. Yeah. I'm talking in circles, basically reiterating everything you just said, but
Well, but
I
that
get
same
it.
idea goes to a lot of problems. If somebody's
Mm-hmm.
facing, maybe a child that has issues or, a pornography, I mean, anything, it's so quick to judge and say, this is what you need to do. And what I've
Right.
kind of had to realize is that from my own experience, I just have to listen and just, just listen. Really, they're going to
Right.
figure out what they need to do. And
Yeah.
try not to cloud their head too much with my
Right.
ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. So, you're a really happy person. You always have been since I've known you. How was
Mm-hmm.
your healing process? I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but like, how long do you feel like it took you? I'm sure you've said you still have those moments of panic, a little bit of PTSD because it was a really big traumatic thing that you experienced. But overall, like, how long did it take until you got into like, I'm not saying it to say that like to really truly move on, you have to do the exact same amount of time that you have done. But what what did like that process look like for you, or how long did it take, or you know what I mean, like in general terms?
So something that I kind of felt guilty about, I'll be really candid, is so we kind of just separated in the house. Does that make sense? I didn't kick
Uh
him out
huh.
of the house. I just kind of said, maybe you can take the guest bedroom for a while. But
Yeah.
what is interesting is that I think if you're both really willing to work on it, and there's a lot of remorse and forgiveness and repentance and stuff like that, very quickly we were able to have just so many amazing conversations where I felt closer to him, and we had more of that kind of emotional, intimate connection than we had
Mm-hmm.
our whole marriage. So
Interesting.
it really sucked that something horrible had to happen in order for us to get to that point. And I mean, granted, that's still mixed with a lot of ugly stuff too. It's not like it was all roses, but there were moments of really good, just amazing things happening. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and slowly that just kind of became more. And
Yeah.
a couple of months later, we had the opportunity to go on a trip that was already pre-planned, and I was a little nervous about that. But I decided to go, and looking back, it's a good thing we did go because we had an amazing experience as our little family. And I just
Right.
think if I would have listened to some of the voices in my head of like, don't go, we would have
Mm-hmm.
missed out on that precious time to really just kind of connect again and grow.
Right. Interesting. So this is, I don't want to say like this, everybody needs to go through an affair to get to this really great place in your marriage, because that's obviously not the
No,
ideal.
I wouldn't recommend it, but
What
maybe that.
No, let's not recommend it. What preventative measures would you give to somebody now, or what things do you do in your marriage now to prevent this from ever happening again? Or like what communication do you feel like you were missing before to have that like emotional intimacy that you do have now?
I think it really is just communicating and spending time together. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard too when you have little ones and you start focusing a lot of attention on little ones, and maybe you're just not spending as much time together, or it's you're going to bed. And I'm sure this is a big issue for everybody. Like, how many people go to bed now and you're laying in bed and he's on his device and you're on your device and you're in the same bed, but no one's
Mm-hmm.
talking.
Yeah, right. And then there's
Or
obviously
find,
no intimacy because that's
yeah.
not going to lead to anything. Right.
So I think it's just, and I think it's not harboring grudges. I think it's just being open and honest in your communication and not being passive aggressive, and just, there's so many things that you could do. I don't necessarily know what could have, prevented it, because a lot of it can depend on the person too and their background on why,
Mm-hmm.
they make choices that they do, if they've had anything in their past or whatever. So I think some things you can try and work on, but I think some things are also out of your control, as sad as
Right.
that is. The other little note I had wrote here, because I thought, oh my gosh, I need to just write some notes, is that sometimes now, after all these years, I get a little upset when I see, especially if I'm scrolling on Facebook and you see these articles titled "Once a cheater, always a cheater," right? How
Mm-hmm.
how how
Mm-hmm.
can you tell if your man's doing whatever? And so sometimes I read them and I laugh at them. But this is kind of a hard thing. Is I think it's not the normal to stay with your spouse.
Yeah.
So as someone who has decided to stay with their spouse, when you hear things or comments that are, once a cheater, always a cheater, I really kind of get defensive about that, because it's such a vague blanket statement,
Yeah.
and really, how do you know? And you know what? And I could be wrong. Like, what if this happened again to me? Like, it very well could. I'm not immune to
Right.
anything.
Right.
And what would I say? Like, then would people be like, haha, I told you so? Was that what my friends would say? I don't
Right.
know, but I just have to, like, really live in the moment and love my family,
Mm-hmm.
and and do all that I can do, because I'm not necessarily in control of everything.
Right. Weird.
So
You're not. I'm totally in control of my whole life. I mean, that's
I
just
mean,
how
I
I
don't want to.
operate.
Yeah, I don't want to live in a state of fear all the time of,
Right.
do you think this could happen? You
Yeah.
know,
Well, nobody does.
that's
Like, but I think so many of us do. Like, people could listen to this and then be like, "Oh my gosh, I have to go check and make sure my husband's not having an affair." Um, and everybody could totally wig out and think this must happen all the time. If it's on this podcast, it's evidence that it's happening to me right now. but that's just not the case, right? Like, so
No,
yeah,
I
I think
mean,
that's an important note to touch on, is that like this isn't, you should never live your life run by fear of like this could happen, because yes, it could happen to anybody. I mean, I think as long as you're being obviously proactive in your marriage, like there's definitely things you can do to stay on the same page as your spouse, but no, I think you're totally right. Like you're not immune from it. You might be, I don't know, maybe you're more likely because it's happened to you before, but it's like, I don't know, maybe you're less likely because it's like you get struck by lightning. You're highly unlikely to get hit by lightning
I
again.
know.
I don't know. Maybe you're safer than the rest of us because now you've gone through it. But no, I think that's good. This is going nowhere really fast. Like, let's just hope that it never happens to you again and that it never happens to anybody else listening to this episode. But if it does,
Well,
I think you've given some really good feedback on, how to process and how to deal with it. I think that's fantastic.
you just have to do you. Like,
Yeah.
as well-meaning as people are, you almost have to, like, really just figure it out for yourself. Now, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
there's different situations, like this doesn't work for every situation, of
Right.
whatever, but some people
Yeah,
cause more damage in trying to help you than good.
exactly.
Is what
Yeah.
I'll say.
Right. Well, that's good to know. Okay, so we haven't really talked about like the traditional things we talk about on these kinds of episodes. Maybe we'll have you on as yourself another time, and we'll just disguise your voice more. I don't know. We'll see. Don't go
That's
try and
funny.
stalk her and do vocal recognition software. Okay, guys, like let's just respect her privacy. Just let her live her life. This is actually a really interesting discussion, though. I want to keep going. I really want to talk about on the Facebook group. So this is something, if you are just listening to this, go check the Facebook because we're probably talking about it over there. Because I do want some feedback. I want to see how many people this has affected, see who's willing to open up and see how they've dealt with it. And maybe it can help other people who are going through it right now. So thanks for being brave enough to come on here, even though it's somewhat anonymous, and share your experience. I think it's been really beneficial, something that needs to be talked about. I think this is an important component to touch on because in one way or another, I think all of us will be affected by something like this. Somebody we know, ourselves, a family member. So thank you for kind of opening that discussion up. I know it's not the most glamorous thing to talk about.
It's quite all right. I'm happy to.
So even though we haven't, again, talked about mommy stuff, I'm going to ask you still the question, what makes you a marvelous mom?
I think it's because I show my kids good examples and I try to practice faith, forgiveness, and love.
I love that.
So
that's an amazing answer.
That's how we have to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's how we all should do things, right? I think that's an amazing perspective. Well, thank you, she who shall not be named. That's really hard to say. She who shall not be named. I really appreciate it. You guys go check out the Facebook group, Marvelous Moms Club on Facebook. Join the inner circle and let's chat more about this. And until then, we'll see you on the next episode. Have a marvelous day.